Hey, what's up, guys? All right, so we'll get right into it. This is our first, I suppose, like real video of the semester, right? As such, I want to explain a little bit more about how they're going to work. Again, on some level, I can explain all day, but until we do a couple of these and sort of, I figure, get a week or two into the semester, it's going to feel strange, or you're not going to be as certain about everything. The point of me telling you that is that's expected. That's fine. You just got to kind of roll with it. You got to figure it out, right? And that brings me to my next note, actually, on the class itself. I haven't had a lot of emails. I've had a handful, though, and that's enough for me to say something. Most of the emails I'm getting, again, the handful that I'm getting, they're like confused about due dates and stuff like that. There's two primary reasons for that in my estimation. One of them is, I think some people, and this is a good impulse, some people are so sort of dialed up to do well in the class and to jump on it and like maybe even potentially get a little bit ahead, that they are steamrolling or attempting to some of the assignments. I got one email actually that said something like, it says the rhetorical analysis is due at this time, this day, or whatever. I'm almost done with it. And I hit him back something to the effect of, you're almost done with a paper we haven't even talked about yet. That's troubling, right? And again, I mean it. That's a good impulse. You're trying to be super on top of things. When you do that, though, the metaphor I would use is there's a cat behind me, by the way. You're sprinting, which again, that could be a good thing, right? It sounds healthy. You're in shape mentally if you continue the metaphor. The problem when you run that fast is you miss things. And you can sometimes even trip over things. Especially, again, as I told that student, we haven't even talked about that paper yet. We're talking about it right now. We're about to do it right now, okay? But I'm sort of, anybody else out there who wants to be really on top of things, which again, is a good impulse. You need a little bit under your belt before you can do that, okay? You cannot just sort of jump out of the plane without a parachute. Let's pack that parachute in for you. Let's get you set up. And then if you want to jump out and do a bunch of flips, go for it, man. Fucking have a blast. But pause for a second. Okay. The other reason I think I'm getting some of the emails, there goes the cat. The other reason I think I'm getting some of the emails is, again, my theory would be, people maybe aren't checking the syllabus, or I've had a few, the way the email was worded, it sounded like they just saw the title of the prompt, which is rhetorical analysis, which I understand on some level could be confusing, but it's in the prompt section. Maybe some of you don't know what a prompt is. A prompt prompts you. It compels you to do something. In this case, it's the instructions for the paper, so it tells you to write the paper. The simple fix with that would be, one, just look at the syllabus. I talked about this in the previous video, which is to say I talked about the syllabus. Look at the syllabus. When in doubt, you can always email me, but I would say first, look at the syllabus. And once you do that, you investigate whatever it tells you to investigate. In this case, the prompt, which you need to read forward today. It's very short, no hardship there. And watch the movie. Do those things. That's all the homework you had for today, okay? Anyway, hopefully that cleared a little bit up for some of you guys. We're gonna jump right into the paper. There's gonna be two parts to this video today. The second part will be screen cap. So that's gonna be you just watching me like type and talk to you. I feel like I can't do all the videos like that because it would put you to sleep. Justifiably so. So for the first bit here, we're going to talk about the prompt. I have it up on an iPad myself. If you need to, pause this video real quick, get the prompt pulled up on Courseden in some capacity, so you can listen to me, I guess, but we'll be looking at this document together. So I'll give you a beat to pause it if you need to, go ahead. And I assume you're back, or in some cases didn't bother to do any of that, which is a hell of an approach. Let's get into it. The prompt, rhetorical analysis. I'm going to go over just sort of the bullet points here, and then I will actually talk to you about what rhetorical analysis even is. To begin with, though, some of the the stuff you guys care about, you tend to care about. The length of the thing, 2 to 3 pages. This is double space, this is MLA. We'll talk a little bit about MLA next time, I suppose. I have to check the syllabus too. But suffice to say, double space, I assume you all at least know what that means. 2 to 3 pages isn't huge, right? It's the sort of thing you can knock out somewhat easily. We are going to have a bit of time to practice that, work on all that, get it to the best place it can be. But that's the length of this first paper, 2 to 3 pages. Oh, and a quick note on that, I suppose. Some of you get really cute with what you think a page is. 2 pages, to be clear, is to the bottom of the second page, or very, 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 very close. If your text appears at the top of the second page, you've given me 1 page, right? Come on, let's. Oh, and somebody's gonna wanna know, works cited doesn't count. You guys are very funny about that stuff. Okay, so 2 to 3 pages, 25% of your total grade, which is a lot. I'm not gonna sugarcoat that. That's a significant portion of your grade. But again, we're gonna spend the next couple weeks talking about the text, investigating it, talking about the paper, and spending as much time, I think, as is feasible to make your paper the best it can be. So don't sweat that too much, at least not right now. Format, as I said, is MLA. I give you some of the finer points of MLA here. If you don't know what MLA is, or if you're just not super confident in it, again, number one, we will talk about it next week, I suppose, because I really want to get into the text today. Secondly, I actually have an MLA template up on Coursden. It's in the syllabus and other helpful documents section. If you go there, click on the template, you can download it, but then you can straight up just copy and paste, I think for the most part, into it, and your paper will, again, for the most part, be in MLA. I would also recommend you could Google MLA format. Like these are not tricky sort of puzzles to solve, but we'll cover it more in depth next week. Source text, The Social Dilemma. You should have watched that by now. If you haven't, go do it right now. Like, right now. But why are you still watching if you haven't? It's an hour and a half, which is how long movies are. I believe in you. I think you can do it. I think you can sit down and watch a movie. It is a documentary, which I understand most of you guys probably you're not huge fans of documentaries. That's okay. Again, I think you can do it. And look, no matter what your opinion of it might be at the start, because there's not like explosions and superheroes and whatnot, I think it's pretty interesting. And to be right to the point, I think it applies to you guys most of all. Like that documentary is about you in a lot of ways. So anyway, and then finally, the paper will be due on the 4th of February. I am notoriously bad with dates. I think I'm filming this on the 12th. That feels right. So again, we have quite a bit of time to work on this paper, talk about it, get it in a good place. But that's when the final draft will be due, the 4th of February. Okay, what the paper is. There's a section there. Again, this first prompt I like to keep pretty brief because we're going to spend time talking about the paper itself. And that's there to read for you. I will never read a prompt at you like that, okay? What the prompt is, though, what rhetorical analysis is this. People say things to you every day, right? You say things to people all the time. What we are more interested in when it comes to rhetoric is how a thing is said, okay? Here's my favorite example of that. When your mother, just, for instance, says, "Did I ask for your opinion?" What is she actually saying to you? Like, what is she communicating to you? A better question might be, what should you respond to that question with? Nothing. You should say nothing. In my experience, I can't speak for everybody's mom. If my mom said a thing like, "Did I ask for your opinion?" she's telling me to shut my mouth, right? But she didn't use those words. None of those words came out of her mouth, right? But it's how she said it, which is of most importance. If she had said, "Shut your mouth," I mean, that gets the point across pretty quick too. But for some reason to say, "Did I ask for your opinion?" it hits just a little bit harder, right? Stings a little bit. I think I would put it to you this way. It doesn't just communicate shut your mouth. It kind of communicates you should know already to shut up, right? When she says that. That's what rhetoric is, what I just did. Like, you start with what is literally said. In this case, did I ask for your opinion? But then you think about the connotations around that phrase. Quick explanation there. Denotation, dictionary definition. Did I ask for your opinion? If you only took that phrase denotatively, you'd probably give your mother your opinion, which would be a mistake, right? In this case. Connotatively, connotations are associations. Those are cultural. Those are built around like narratives that we have, associations that we have around language and certain contexts, you know, depending. So, for instance, if your mother says a thing like, did I ask for your opinion? The context of that usually is she's pissed about something. It could be anything, any number of things, right? It's probably your fault. You know, that's how that goes. But that's the context of the situation. And you're in that situation, so you are hopefully aware of that context, right? And now that's going to shape the connotations of that phrase. Again, to give you a related example, if, I don't know, if your mom is like changing the wallpaper in the house or something, I don't know, that sprang to mind because my wife is always doing stuff like that in our house. And she comes to you and she goes, hey, did I ask for your opinion? Now her tone is different there, which is important, but also the context is different. I think she actually wants your opinion. She realizes, I didn't ask Jimmy what he thinks about, right? So it's the exact same language, but the presentation has changed. The tone is very different, which is important in this case, and the context is very different, which changes how you read it. The rhetoric of the situation is different. That's how rhetoric works. That's how the analysis thereof works. It depends upon context. It depends upon specific details like tone. And basically what we're going to try to do in this paper is take specific moments, and there's many in this film, but take specific moments and think about a couple key components, right? And I've broken it down into three things that I'm going to relate to everything I just said at you. Number one, who is the intended audience of this documentary? To be perfectly frank with you, I think generally the audience is somebody like me, okay? I'm older than you guys, you know, clearly. I got little kids. Like, for instance, I've seen the documentary a couple times now because that's what I do to prep for this class. The scene with the little girl where she's on, like, you know, some faux Instagram and somebody makes fun of her ears and like where she's looking at herself in the mirror. Oh my God, I almost lose it every time. Like, I know it's coming now, but I just think about my kids and like, they're gonna have to deal with that. Oh my God, it's awful. It's awful, right? So it's pretty clear a lot of the movie is meant for somebody like me, you know, in a position in life that I'm in. But I think there are other parts that they're trying to connect with more with people like you, right? So the audience in this case, I think, is varied. And again, we'll get more into this. I hate to keep saying this, but probably next week, probably not today. But I think you could almost divide the movie into little sections. Like, certain parts, I think, are more for different kinds of people. So the movie's trying to reach, you know, sort of a broader audience, but it does that in sort of surgical ways, right? Like, maybe this section is more for me, this section is more for you, and it kind of tries to bounce back and forth, I think. But we'll see. So intended audience is one. Secondly, what message is the text trying to get across? I mean, this movie is pretty much like, oh my God, everything's terrible. That's a gross oversimplification of the documentary, but generally speaking, that's the message, right? If you had to sum it up in like 3 words or whatever I just gave you, that's not inaccurate. But again, the real crux of the issue is, how do they get that message across? This documentary gets that message across in numerous ways. They take all kinds of approaches. In your paper, you would work with some of those very specific approaches. Like, in this scene, this happens and it looks like this, or it's said like this. The delivery of that message in this way does this, works upon this aspect of our expectations or our sort of human predilections. So for instance, again, to bring it full circle, the example I gave you about my own children and seeing that little girl like go through just a ridiculous moment, like there's no reason she should have to deal with that shit, right? But it is something that happens, and they kind of back it up with data, which is another sort of rhetorical technique, you know, with that graph and everything. But even just watching a little girl like cry because some asshole talks about her ears, right, is low-key devastating. So it's what's called an emotional appeal. It affects me anyway, emotionally, because now I'm thinking about not just kids, but my own kids at some point, and this just awful aspect of our society that they're gonna have to navigate. That's how that particular rhetorical technique works on me, yeah, the audience that I'm a part of. So that might be a body paragraph, say, in how we talk about this paper. All right, so again, very generally speaking, that's how the paper works. We're gonna dive into it a little more in depth in the next video, which, the next video, there's gonna be 2 today, okay? So that's coming. But generally, that's how the paper works. You identify specific moments from the text, in this case a film, and you think about not just what is said, you gotta start there, or what is conveyed, but how. That's what matters to us, how it's conveyed. Okay, last but not least, this part of the video, summary. Sorry, I had to get something to drink. I realized I was dying. All right. I assume, in some respects, all of you have a working definition of summary, right? Like, what is it to summarize? In this case, if you were, again, to summarize the documentary, it would be what? Social media, according to these folks, is sort of poisoning our society, sort of polarizing everybody, not just politically, which is what we're most used to talking about these days, but really when it comes to just about anything. It pushes people to feel very dramatically about anything, any ideas they might have, beliefs they might have, and that's a bad thing. I just summed up the whole movie, hour-and-a-half movie, in 3 sentences, I think, something like that. So by its very nature, it's going to be generalized and vague, which is okay. Again, that's to be expected. But when it comes to what you're going to do in this paper, you want to, you know, at the beginning of it, in your introduction, you're going to have to summarize the film along similar lines to what I just did, I suppose. But the bulk of our work is going to concern body paragraphs. And in those, you're going to have to not summarize the entire film, but a moment in a scene, you know? So here in a minute, we're going to look at the beginning of the movie, actually. If you want to go ahead and cue that up, you can. You'd have to pull up Netflix, pull up the movie. We're going to look at the first 3 minutes and 30 seconds of the film today. That's it. Okay, but I think it's a really good opening. There's a lot to think about, to talk about. And to begin with, if we were to sum that up, and I've been talking a lot, sorry, I'm gonna do one more of these. If we were to sum up that first 3.5 minutes, what is it? And if you don't remember, again, you can pause this and go look at it real quick. I'll give you a second. Cool. All right, the first 3.5 minutes, it's an introduction, right? Not just to the sort of main idea of the documentary, which I think it is. Like, by the end of that 3.5 minutes, you're like, oh, okay, this is about social media and how these people think it's affecting us, and pretty clearly they don't think it's good, those effects anyway. That's the main idea. It kind of lays that out in general terms. It's built like, not unlike a paper. You know, that's their introduction. They kind of give you their thesis by the end of the 3.5 minutes. But it's also, I think smartly, an introduction to all, well, most of the major players we're going to see in the film. Literally an introduction. Like most of them, or maybe even all of them, kind of like walk in and sit, and you see them like fidget and mess with stuff, and they're talking to the people behind the camera, and they're doing all this. Which is an interesting rhetorical technique that we'll talk about in a moment. But if I was going to sum any of that up, right, I wouldn't probably sum up even the whole 3.5 minutes, because if you go back and watch it, kind of a lot happens actually. So what we would instead need to do, if we're thinking about making this into, you know, a body paragraph, say, what moment are we going to focus on? One thing that interests me is the people, like Tristan, like the main guy. We follow him through a lot of the documentary. He is my favorite actually in this part, because he sits and he's kind of doing this, and it's actually weird. Everybody else sits and talks like immediately for whatever reason. And again, we could think about it for our analysis if we wanted to. They let him sit, and they show a lot of him. Like he doesn't even talk at first. He's like doing this and kind of, and then at one point he gets out his phone, which is spectacular, right? With everything this documentary is about, you see him go, you know, he's doing this. You're like, he can't help it either, right? What if we wanted to sum that up, just his part? At the very beginning of the documentary, we see Tristan Harris, who we soon learn is an expert in the field, worked for Google, works now still like in the tech world, is very invested in like the ethics of all these technologies. But we see him sit, not speaking, and we're allowed to, for a few moments, just watch him be himself, I think. That's how, minus the I think, right? But that's how I might sum up the first, sort of our introduction to him. And from there, and this I'm going to segue now to the next video, but from there, we would get more specific. We would think about details we could focus on, which is where our analysis begins. But to make more sense of that, as I said, next video is going to be a screen cap, so you won't have to look at me anymore. And we'll kind of spell some of this out, like what it would actually look like in a paper. All right.